This podcast is part of the Big Heads Media Podcast Network. Go to bigheadsmedia.com for more great podcasts.
Come on. Not over yet.
You are now tuned in to the Casual Colts Podcast. Everything about the Indianapolis Colts with William E. Ricks. What is up, everyone? This is William E. Ricks, and welcome to the Casual Colts Podcast. Thank you for tuning in, and we have some great things coming up for you this episode. The regular season is finally here, and the Colts could have some issues throughout the year because of their low vaccination rates. We broach this subject again, as the squad still has one of the lowest vaccination rates in the NFL. Could this derail a season that has already had its fair share of drama for Indy? The protocols for unvaxxed players are different compared to fully vaxxed players, something to keep a note on. We continue our regular season preview series, and we're on to weeks 13, 14, and 15 this week. After two straight losses, can Indy rebound and get back in the win column? And will Carson Wentz make his return, hypothetically, in this 3-week span? You guys stay tuned to find out. The 53-man roster is finally set, and we review who made the cut and how the roster looks before week 1 against the Seattle Seahawks. Is this roster deep enough and talented enough to be a force in the NFL this season? There's definitely some star power, but we all know football is a team game, so all players on the field must perform well if Indy wants to see true success. We'll lastly cover the latest injury developments on the team. It seems like we can never go a full week without some bad COVID or injury news, sadly. T.Y. Hilton and Sam Ellinger both received diagnosis for their injuries, and they will miss some time. With the rash of injuries, who will need to step up while Indy tries to get completely healthy? There's a lot to get to, so buckle up and get ready for another great episode of the Casual Colts Podcast. Woo! Regular season football is back, baby! You are now tuned in to the Casual Colts Podcast, so come as you are, and as always, keep it casual. Week 1 is fast approaching, which means Indy could have a much more difficult season than others. They are still one of the lowest vaccinated teams in the NFL, and many of their key players aren't fully vaccinated yet. The team has dealt with positive COVID tests during training camp, literally, as Frank Reich tested positive like the first day of training camp. Quentin Nelson, Eric Fisher, Zach Pascal, Carson Wentz, and Ryan Kelly have all spent some time on Indy's reserved COVID list. These are players that are essential to team success this season, making it even more concerning that they haven't received the full COVID-19 vaccine yet. I talked about how the NFL protocols will differ between fully vaccinated and non-vaccinated players in episode 3, so go check that out for a more detailed breakdown. But in simple terms, vaccinated players won't have to sit out as long if they test positive for COVID compared to unvaxxed players. That could be huge for a Colts team who touts a concerningly low team vaccination rate. One outbreak could cause Indy to be without multiple players, hell, even an entire position group if it gets that serious. The NFL isn't going to be generous rescheduling games this year, which could result in forfeitures. Every game matters in the football season, and it will be disappointing to find out the Colts lost one because of a lack of players due to a COVID outbreak. I understand that's everyone's individual choice, but availability is the best ability in the NFL. Teams like the Bucs and Chiefs have 90 to 100% vaccination rates, showing that they are willing to take the shot if that means an easier season for everyone involved. General Manager Chris Ballard spent a lot of his time in his press conference last Wednesday talking about the vaccine and his team's struggles in getting to the league recommended vaccination rate. He said that he supports the vaccine, but stands with his players who decide not to get it. However, he also realizes that there are unavoidable consequences unvaccinated players might have to deal with in making that decision. I get the message Ballard is trying to send, but I don't think it's the right one in this time frame. He's seen firsthand how COVID ravaged his team during camp, so he should have been a little bit more forceful. That's lack of a better word currently, but forceful in his vaccine stance for his team. This was the time to do so right before the regular season starts. A more forceful or stern stance from the GM could have inspired some players to get it. Who knows? But his passive stance isn't going to make any of his players feel like the vaccine is necessary when, if the Colts want to have their best season possible, it's strongly recommended. Indy is making its own bed in terms of its vaccination rates. God forbid a positive test causes them to lose a game or miss a key player in an important game. In my opinion, getting the vaccine for NFL players shows that they're committed to doing everything possible to keeping their teammates, coaches, and other team personnel safe. It also shows that they're willing to do what it takes to win. Now, it might be a stretch, but again, it's just my opinion. As much as I love Indy, I will have no sympathy if an outbreak causes a bump in their season. They have all the time in the world to get the vaccine and even have an FDA-approved one to rely on now if they were concerned about the emergency use label that all the vaccines had prior, or some still have. Hopefully, nothing happens, but given the Colts' luck so far, something definitely will. There's a week until the season, and the COVID Colts could have a long year because of their low vaccination rates. Coming up next on the show, we have our regular season preview series, but this week, it's a trifecta. We're going to hit weeks 13, 14, and 15 this week, as the Colts look to get back on track after 2 straight losses. So come on back and kick it with the Casual Colts Podcast after this break. Don't go yet. There's still more Colts content coming your way, so keep it locked to the Casual Colts Podcast. The Colts are 8-4 in our regular season preview series, which is not too bad given the circumstances. However, they are coming into week 13 on a 2-game skid. They face division rival, the Houston Texans, who are still without Deshaun Watson. You all should know why by now, so I'm not going to get into it. The Colts beat Houston the first time they met in this preview series, 24-10, being carried by their defense. This time around, the defense continues its dominance, and it gets some help from the offense as well. Jacob Easton is beginning to find his groove, finally, throwing for 3 touchdowns in this game. 2 of them went to Michael Pittman Jr., who caught 6 catches for 95 yards on the day. The running game took a backseat because of Easton's explosive performance, but Jonathan Taylor was able to find the end zone once. Nyheim Hines showed his versatility also, catching 6 passes for 75 yards and a score. The offense was a well-oiled machine, which was much needed coming off back-to-back losses. The defense continues its stranglehold over the Texans' offense as Darius Leonard leads the way with 2 sacks and an interception. They make Tyrod Taylor's life miserable as the Texans' O-line failed to protect him. A 6-sack game by the Colts D signifies how much success they had against Houston's front. Taylor throws 2 touchdowns and 2 picks in a mediocre game for him, but it wasn't all his fault. The combination of a dominating defensive performance and an explosive offensive performance from Easton propelled the Colts to victory. They defeat the Texans 28-14, sweeping the season series against their rivals. Indy gets back into the win column, and it was much needed. In week 14, they have their bye week, giving their squad some rest and relaxation before the final 3-game stretch. After their bye, they face the New England Patriots. There's also some great news for the team after the bye week, so come on back and see what it is on the Casual Colts Podcast. Hey, you better not be falling asleep on me. Make sure you're up so you don't miss this Colts content. Keep it locked to the Casual Colts Podcast. Come on now. In week 15 of our regular season preview series, Carson Wentz finally makes his return from his foot injury. Thank God. Whew. He'll be thrown in as the QB1 and will have a tough challenge in his first game back. The New England Patriots come to town, led by the master himself, Bill Belichick. Rookie Mac Jones is a starter for New England, which is quite a surprise if you ask me. Reverting to real life for a second, the Pats released Cam Newton, making Jones their QB1 of now and the future. I thought Cam would start and the team would groom Jones throughout the season, but they are throwing him to the Wolves to start week 1. Interesting approach for Belichick and crew. But back to our preview series, the Colts-Pats game will be an ugly slugfest. After not playing for weeks, Wentz's rush shows as he doesn't connect with his receivers on some relatively easy routes. The defense keeps Indy afloat, however, hounding the rookie Mac Jones. They bait him into 2 interceptions, getting the offense some extra possessions throughout the game. Jones did make it to the end zone, scoring 1 touchdown on the day. Wentz and the offense rely on the running game as Jonathan Taylor, Marlon Mack, and Nyheim Hines each score on the ground. Wentz throws a TD in his first game back, but also has an interception. He played more of a game manager role than a top-tier quarterback type role in his return, but that's okay. It's his first game back, still knocking some rust off. The Colts' run game and defense are the keys in this matchup. They pound the Patton to the ground and make life hard for Jones. That combination is what has Indy winning the contest handily. They send Belichick home with a loss, defeating the Pats 30-17. 15 weeks down and 2 more to go. The Colts are 10-5, which sounds right on par if you ask me. They should control their own destiny if they have this record after 15 weeks of football. I don't see why they can't achieve this unless COVID gets in the way. Next on the Casual Colts Podcast, we will look over the final 53-man roster, or I should say the initial 53-man roster. Which players made the cut, and how should we feel about the roster entering 2021? We'll cover that next, so stay tuned, and always, keep it casual. Hi everyone, this is William E. Ricks, and I want to thank you for tuning into this episode of the Casual Colts Podcast. Make sure you follow us on Twitter and turn those notifications on so you never miss updates and cool content from us in the show. You can follow us on Twitter at Casual Colts Pod, on Instagram at Casual Colts Pod, and we also have a YouTube channel. You can go there and search us as the Casual Colts Podcast. If you have any topics you want us to discuss, debate anything we've had previously discussed, want to say hi, talk football smack, or anything about the Colts, or even your favorite team, make sure to reach out to us via email at casualcoltspodcast@gmail.com. But that's enough of me chatting, enough of me getting in the way of the show. Let's get back to some content and keep it locked on the Casual Colts Podcast. The end of the preseason is one of the more difficult times for NFL players and coaches. The front office personnel have to cut the roster down to 53 men, meaning many players will be let go and in some cases ending their football dreams. Colts have finished their 53-man roster, or what many people call the initial 53. And a few things stood out to me when looking at the depth chart. The first is the number of defensive linemen that were on the team. So Indy has decided to keep 11 defensive linemen on the initial 53. And that is a lot of beef in the trenches, but it could be part of a bigger plan. Having a rotating defensive line during games is starting to be more of a common theme because of how often teams pass. Offensive linemen are going to be entered constantly every play, and having fresh D linemen to give a valuable pass rush could mean sacks, forced fumbles, and even touchdowns. So maybe the Colts are wanting to try that out this year. And I mean, they have the talent to do so on their defensive line. They have DeForest Buckner, Kwity Paye as a rookie, Grover Stewart, who was solid last year, Antoine Woods, Kamiko Toure, Bam Banogu. So they have the talent to have a solid rotation on defensive line. So I think that's what they're trying to do. Maybe that's just what I'm thinking. That's the only reason I think they should have 11 D linemen on their team if they're going to have a consistent rotation. Nevertheless, that was one of the things that stuck out to me the most at the 53-man roster for the Colts. I did like how Indy kept 6 receivers, and it's even more important they did so now that T.Y. Hilton is out for the foreseeable future. I'll get to that, more on that later. Michael Strachan, Desmond Patton, and Ashton Doolin impressed during their preseason, which earned them a spot on the roster. I expect all 3 to get some playtime in the regular season because of how well they performed in the preseason, and now that T.Y. Hilton is going to be out for at least a month, maybe 2. The QB spot is still something I'll be keeping my eye on, and I'll be watching very, very attentively. Carson Wentz, Jacob Easton, and Sam Ellinger are the only 3 quarterbacks on the roster, and Ellinger is currently out with a knee injury. Wentz's injury history and Easton's inconsistency make me think the Colts should look into getting someone on their practice squad just as extra insurance. You can never be too careful, especially at the quarterback position. One more thing that caught my eye, and it was the impressive streak that has come to an end for Indy. There are no undrafted rookies on the initial 53, ending the team streak of 21 years having an undrafted rookie on their roster. This is a fantastic streak that unfortunately comes to an end, but it shows that the Colts looked high and low for great talent for the last 2 decades. Unfortunately, they just couldn't find an undrafted rookie that they felt comfortable with this year. I think the Colts roster is solid and has the potential to do many great things this season. However, health will be a huge factor in that. Injuries and COVID have already been a huge issue for the team during training camp and earlier in OTAs and stuff, and the regular season didn't even start yet. Hopefully, the team can get back to 100% and stay there from week 1 to week 17 and beyond. And I mentioned how injuries have been a problem for Indy since really the start of team activities. And coming up next, I provide updates to some injured Colts players and see who needs to step up while they are out. So don't go anywhere because the Casual Colts Podcast will be right back. Thanks for tuning in to the Casual Colts Podcast. I hope you're enjoying this episode's content, and stay tuned because we got much more stuff to get into. Don't touch that dial. It's safe and very fair to say that the injury bug has bit the Colts hard. Capital H-A-R-D, hard. They've had to deal with a plethora of ailments to key players during camp, and as the regular season approaches, more injury news comes out of Indy. Here are some updates on some injured Colts and their potential timetables for their return. So starting with T.Y. Hilton, and I broke T.Y. Hilton's injury news last episode, but didn't provide much detail. After a week, we have a clear picture of his injury and his recovery. Hilton underwent neck surgery to fix an issue there last week. He injured his neck in practice on August 29th and hasn't played in any of Indy's preseason games. The surgery was successful and the team put him on IR to start the year. That means the 31-year-old receiver will miss at least 3 games before being eligible to return. General Manager Chris Ballard did say that Hilton should return sooner rather than later, but didn't give a specific timetable on his return. With Hilton out, it means Michael Pittman Jr., Zach Pascal, and Paris Campbell must step up. They all have unique skill sets, making them a potent trio. But Campbell fails to stay on the field because of injuries, and Pittman and Pascal can be inconsistent at times. This season, they can't afford to do that, especially with the QB situation still up in the air. So it makes sense that a team put Strachan, Patton, and Doolin on the initial 53 to combat Hilton's injury. They'll be called on to make plays, and they need to execute. The wide receiver core is without a veteran presence, but it opens the door for one of the younger receivers to take that next leap. Sam Ellinger injured his knee in the final preseason game against the Detroit Lions. It didn't look good initially, and head coach Frank Reich echoed that sentiment post-game. Luckily, it only turned out to be a knee sprain for the rookie, and he was placed on IR and will be gone for at least a month. This means that Easton is the QB1 heading into week 1 unless the team clears Wentz to play from his foot injury. Sam Tevi suffered a torn ACL, which ended his season. He was in contention with Julian Davenport for the starting left tackle spot throughout training camp. He was also placed on IR, but he won't be back like the former 2 players I mentioned. The Colts have put rookie defensive lineman Deo Odengbo on the non-football injury list, meaning he will miss 8 games at least. He is still recovering from a torn Achilles he suffered while training for the NFL draft earlier this year. Indy has taken the long game approach, which makes sense. He's shown that he can be a dominant force in college. Now he just needs to focus on getting back healthy and being that same presence for Indy. So the injuries keep piling up for the Colts, and hopefully this is the worst of it and nothing serious comes up during the regular season. However, with the high expectations, one injury could ruin what could be a special season. Let's hope and pray that the injury bug is behind us and the Colts can have a healthy 2021 regular season. Boom! That wraps up another episode of the Casual Colts Podcast. Thank you to everyone who listened. I hope you enjoyed everything you heard today. It was engaging. I hope you really enjoyed yourselves. Make sure to subscribe to our podcast. We are available on every streaming platform: Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Transistor, Amazon Music. Wherever you listen to your podcast, we are there. So go check us out and make sure to subscribe so you can catch past and future episodes. Also, follow us on social media. We have a Twitter account at Casual Colts Pod, an Instagram account at Casual Colts Pod, and a YouTube page called Casual Colts Podcast. So make sure to follow us on those things. And also, turn on those post notifications so you never miss any amazing Casual Colts content. Lastly, and as always, please email any questions, comments, topics, smack talk, or reviews at casualcoltspodcast@gmail.com. We are always open to listening to you guys, and always we want to hear from you guys. So please send us a message. We will make sure we reply, I promise. So well, guys, that's the end of the episode. Continue to strive for greatness this week. Have a great week, and as always, keep it casual and go Colts.